Hey everybody, I'm Braveskin. In this video we're going to be melting down some silver scraps from a previous melt and forming it into some small silver beads. We're using a small homemade furnace I made from a steel paint can and some ceramic wool. There's a small hole toward the bottom where a propane torch can fit in and heat our crucible. Now it only takes a few minutes for it to get red hot in there, so I place the lid over the top to help it along and check on it periodically. Now the reason we're doing this is to reduce the size of some metallic silver so that it can be more easily weighed out for future chemistry experiments. When the metal market dipped at the start of the pandemic, I bought a number of silver coins specifically for use in chemistry. And hopefully we'll see some videos related to that in the near future. So at this point the furnace is quite hot, but since I have a second torch, I use it to get things melted in a hurry. Before long, we can see that the first drips of molten silver are in the crucible, and I continue this until it's all completely melted. Once the silver is in a nice shiny pool at the bottom of the crucible, we're ready for our first pour. I leave the torches on for a little longer than it takes to melt the metal to get it hotter than the melting point of silver, so it doesn't immediately freeze in the crucible. Now that we're ready to pour, I put a leather glove on my hand to protect it from the intense heat, and clamp the crucible to remove it from our furnace and adjust my grip on it. Now the clamps I'm using aren't entirely appropriate, so I did drop it and spill a little bit, but it wasn't too big of a deal. Could have been much worse. To form the molten silver into small beads or globules, we simply pour it into some water. I've since learned that ice-cold water works better for this, but I didn't have much trouble without ice. Here you can see we have some still left in the crucible that solidified before we could pour it out, but we're going to remelt it anyway. So I reopen the propane cylinder, and the heat remaining in the furnace is enough to ignite it without any help. Here's a quick look at our first globules so far. This time the crucible and the furnace are already very hot, so it doesn't take long to melt down the remnant silver, especially with the help of the second torch. This time the silver is much shinier because a lot of the slag has been, I guess, destroyed or removed from our batch, from our first pour. Looks like there is still some debris floating around in there, but you can almost see the reflection of my face in this molten silver. So our second pour is much like the first. I'm just a little bit more careful with the clamp this time so none gets spilled. Now I do use the torch to kind of help keep the crucible hot so it minimizes how much gets stuck in the crucible. Now there is still a small amount that gets stuck inside, but I use the torch to kind of coax it off and it falls off into the water, so we're left with a clean vessel. And here's the remnant that fell out. Now that we're all done melting, I pick up the individual blobs of silver out of the water by hand and place them in a beaker. Some of them are large and misshapen from me pouring too quickly, but many of the pieces collected are exactly the shape and size I was looking for. So after they're all collected, I take them inside and kind of inspect them a little bit more closely and put them in a vial to store them. The nice and round ones get collected, but the ones that maybe are a little bit bigger or might have some impurities stuck in them, they get set off to the side. Now this takes a little while, but at the end we're left with a vial of nice clean silver beads and then some scrap silver left over that we can include in our next melt. So in the end we have our vial with all of our collected silver. I did put it in with some that I collected earlier, but I do like how shiny it all looks, and keeping it in a vial should prevent it from becoming all oxidized and tarnished over time, at least until I'm ready to use it. Here's the leftover scrap. There's really not too much. It should do well in the next melt. But thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you for the next one.